I'm Coulter Wonkite. I'm already into the 420, damn it.
You know I blame it on industry. I blame it on my own hypocrisy. Miseducation and politicians. No one's willing to step up and speak.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pace Radio Show. We are live, coming to you from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Al is away tonight at the Price is Right show, so I'll be doing this alone this evening, but no worries. We've got an interesting guest, so things are going to be great. Tonight, I have someone from the United States. So I'd like to welcome Michigan attorney Bruce Leach to the Pace Radio Show. Welcome, Bruce.
Well, thank you so much, Alicia. This is a great honor to be on the show, and hello to all of our friends from the North.
Awesome. So, Bruce, I guess we're going to go right back to the beginning, and I'm going to ask you, so why law? So you're an attorney, and take us back to when you first conceived the notion that you were going to become an attorney.
All right. Well, thanks. Well, I was born and raised in Grand Blanc, Michigan, which is in the Flint area, and went to Grand Blanc High School. When I graduated high school, I went to Syracuse University, actually with a television, radio, and film production major, and I was really enjoying working in the media field. And it came to the point in about my junior year of college at Syracuse University that I figured that, I think it might be fun to be a trial lawyer and, try to help people and seek some justice in the legal system. So once I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, I went to University of Miami in Florida for law school and had a great experience there and a lot of great professors and great local attorneys and judges who came and supported that program. They had an excellent litigation skills program where we got some really hands-on trial experience at a very early stage. And I knew then that this was something that I would love to do and was very passionate about, helping protect people's rights. When I was living in Miami, Michigan came on the news and said that they had passed the Medical Marijuana Act. And once that had happened, I kind of was destiny calling for me. This is, something that I'm very, I'm very supportive of. I'm an incredible advocate for medical marijuana and all of the amazing benefits that it provides to people. And it was pretty clear that it was time to move back from Miami and back to Michigan so that I could, help good people and patients and caregivers protect themselves against what is inevitably police abuse and overreach. We've got a few competing interests, the police and prisons and judicial system that makes a lot of money off of putting people in there for technical violations or other issues. And it's just not right. The law, when the law was originally written in Michigan, it wasn't written very well. Left a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty. And, even as a lawyer who my practice is entirely focused on medical marijuana law, it's been a process and an evolution to keep up and, understand the law as it's changed in a case-by-case basis. So because the law wasn't written very well, unfortunately, it was left to the courts to interpret those ambiguities. And generally speaking, police and prosecutors and judges kind of end up tending to be on the same team. So the interpretations that were coming out of the court initially were not favorable to patients or caregivers. So what I did was, dedicated my life and my law practice to trying to help get some good rulings and create some good law that is actually going to be effective for protecting patients and caregivers.
Awesome. So take us to one of your very first cases in terms of medical marijuana, something that has stuck with you over the years that you've been practicing.
Well, I've been fortunate to deal with a lot of patients and caregivers and people who truly need this medicine and who it's really saved their life and the quality of life for so many people that, it's really for lack of a better term, ignorant to say that it's not medical and that it's, they're using it to get high or whatever. I mean, sure, there are people who do that, but in my experience, I've been very fortunate dealing with mostly patients and caregivers who really need this medicine. And, it's really been a journey that's been difficult and stressful at times, but other times very rewarding when we do secure dismissals and get some real justice for people. I'm sorry, can you hold on 1 second, please?
Oh, for sure. Seems like we have an upset baby, which is no worries. That happens, and that's awesome that we have
yeah, I'm sorry. My daughter
daddy caring to his baby.
Yeah, she's just fussing around a little bit right now, but thank you very much for understanding. So she's
no
a
worries.
sweetheart.
She's good now?
But, so I've been very fortunate in dealing with those cases and then working through those defenses. And in Michigan, under the Michigan law, we have the Medical Marijuana Act, which has two different types of protections. So number one is I'm sorry, hold on. Hi, honey. My daughter is so cute. She's following me everywhere. But we have the two levels of protections in the Medical Marijuana Act. Number one is the Section 4, which is the immunity provision. So as long as you're compliant with the strict interpretation of the law, which is less than 12 plants in a locked and closed facility, possession of a valid medical card, and that you're using it for medical purposes, you're entitled to an immunity defense, that they can't arrest you, they can't take your medicine or property or plants or anything like that. I'm sorry, 1 second. Please forgive me.
No worries. Well, this Section 4 seems very interesting about the immunity clause. I wonder if that would be applicable in Canada in terms of using that argument in such that they have law that prevents arrest.
Oh. All right, sorry, I'm back.
No worries. Section 4 is very interesting.
Yeah, the immunity provision is great, but it's very difficult to comply with because of the way, the 12 plants and 2.5 ounce limit is what you're allowed to possess. Now, 2.5 ounces of usable marijuana, which has been defined as the dried buds. And, for a long time, police would seize plants and put the entire plant on the scale and say you've got 5 pounds, therefore you're, way over your 2.5 ounce limit, even though the entire plant is not the usable portion of the plant. There are whole plant medicines and extracts and things like that, but for a long time, Michigan didn't recognize that. So, police would, basically be putting a thumb on the scale by weighing the entire plants or wet buds that weren't fully dried and cured, and using those heavier weights against people to prosecute them for violations. So it was really unfair, and that's been a big battle that's been fought here in Michigan, is getting them to recognize, that there are reasonable limits. So if you're within the parameters of the Section 4 immunity, then you're fine, and they can't arrest you or take your things when they come to your house. But if you had 3 ounces instead of 2.5, or 13 plants instead of 12, they'll take your stuff, cut down your plants, and then you're in a situation what's called a Section 8 affirmative defense. Now, in the affirmative defense, what you have to do is you then have the burden, like a civil trial, of putting on the evidence that shows that number one, you had a bona fide doctor-patient relationship, that you didn't basically just go to a rubber stamp doctor to get your marijuana card. And, unfortunately, that was a big hang-up because originally that was not a requirement. And the courts and prosecutors would attack the doctors and say that, you're not a real doctor if you're recommending marijuana. You're a sham doctor. So they kind of would target doctors in an attempt to abuse patients and caregivers. So throughout that process, they then codified the requirement to have a bona fide doctor-patient relationship. So, and the elements of that are that, you've got an in-person visit, that, they've done the standard medical things like take your height, weight, blood pressure, review your medical history and everything else, and, get to, anything a traditional doctor would also do in their office. And then you're supposed to have ongoing treatment and maintaining a relationship with that doctor similar to a primary care physician. But, the thing about modern science and medicine is that they're really, here in Michigan at least, there aren't very many family general doctors anymore. Everyone is a specialist in something. So if you've got a foot issue, you go to a podiatrist. If you've got a gastrointestinal issue, you go to a doctor of internal medicine. So there's specialists for each category. And the requirement kind of flies in the face of doctors specializing in their area. I mean, that's like a lawyer saying I can handle a class action lawsuit, a divorce, or a DUI, or a drug possession case, all the same. And that's just not true. I mean, there's a reason why people specialize in their areas and fields, and it's obviously best when you're using an expert in their field. Similar to a car mechanic, they may be able to fix certain brands of cars, but not all of them. So you want to find a doctor that's really good at what they do as well. And in the beginning, a lot of doctors were kind of rubber stamping things because they didn't have to do anything more. But when that law changed, they upped the information and contact requirements and then codified what's a bona fide doctor-patient relationship. Now, once they had that, then the other elements of the Section 8 defense are that you possessed a reasonable amount. And a reasonable amount is any amount that's over the 2.5 ounce limit, but it's reasonable for a continuous uninterrupted supply of medicine. So we've got a conflict between you're allowed to grow 12 plants and yet only possess 2.5 ounces of bud marijuana, which is a bit ridiculous from 12 plants, obviously, for anybody who knows what they're doing growing. And then you've got the flip side of that says Section 8 affirmative defense, you can possess any amount as long as it's reasonably necessary for your medical use. So 2.5 ounces could become 2.5 pounds. And over a certain period of time and in between harvests and due to the quality and storage of the medicine, significantly larger amounts are okay to possess for the continuous uninterrupted supply of medicine. But you're subject to that getting seized and taken and having to then go to court to prove your innocence. And when you're in the affirmative defense phase of the court proceedings, it's more like a civil trial where you have to put on your own evidence, call your own witnesses, call the doctor, and even sometimes call your own patients on the stand to testify to their conditions. And depending on where you are in Michigan and which court system you're in, it varies wildly between the requirements and the bias or fairness of the prosecutors and judges. So the lack of uniformity across Michigan in the interpretation and application of the Medical Marijuana Act has been a big difficulty for people. I mean, one city you're fine doing what you're doing, and the next town over they're going to try to put you in prison. So the lack of uniformity has been unfair, and it's led to a lot of issues. But I kind of give you a little anecdote story. So obviously this is my area of focus in my practice, and pretty much all I do at this point. And I teach seminars and, give informational talks to groups and try to help people understand the law and all the updates and changes that happen. So I was giving a presentation last year to the Genesee County Bar Association, which is where Flint, Michigan is located. And it was a room full of about 100 judges and attorneys. And the prosecuting attorney and I had a little debate session going on where he would stand up and talk for 10 to 15 minutes, and I would talk for 10 to 15 minutes during the lunch hour. So we kind of went back and forth, and the prosecuting attorney in charge of the drug crimes unit stood up and said, "Hello, everyone. This is who I am, and these are the rules for the Medical Marijuana Act." And he laid them out there pretty clearly. And then when it was my turn, I said, "Okay, everybody, you all just heard from the prosecuting official that's in charge of prosecuting you if you break these laws, exactly what the law is and how you're supposed to do it. So raise your hand if you think you can be 100% compliant with this law at all times." And general response was laughter from the entire room. And I said, I hear some laughter in the back, and I can appreciate that response because you're laughing because it's ridiculous and it's very complex and hard to understand what the prosecuting attorney just told you and how that even works in the real world. So if a room full of judges and attorneys can't understand this law and be fully compliant with it, how in the world would the average person, patient or caregiver, especially considering some of these patients are handicapped, be able to understand, keep up, and comply with it? I mean, even attorneys that are on the daily listservs that get the case updates the moment they, hit the press, in our published opinions from the courts have a difficult time keeping up with it, understanding it, and being able to apply that to their work in defending these cases. So, again, it's not fair if a room full of judges and lawyers can't understand this. It's not fair to hold those patients and caregivers to that same standard. And, that's been one of the primary issues and things that I've been trying to battle is, when I go into some of these other court areas that don't understand this area of law or that are, biased and prejudiced against it because they either don't know, they don't understand, they've never had any direct dealings with a patient or caregiver who truly needs this medicine. So they have their own opinions formed, and it's very difficult to overcome those. But by going and, fighting the good fight and bringing the appropriate litigation skills and defense tactics to bear in those cases in courtrooms, if you win one of those cases, you've now set the precedent and changed the judge and perhaps even the prosecutor's opinion and mindset on how they're going to go forward in prosecution of these cases, if they are at all, and how they would be, more fair in dealing with the people in those situations. So that's probably the most rewarding part of my job is, when I'm able to go into enemy territory and battle one of these cases and win a victory in a dismissal on behalf of one of my clients. It's incredibly rewarding, but also knowing that hopefully that will change their perspective and view going forward on how they treat these people and treat them like people rather than, everyday criminals. And, again, I don't take the real bad guy cases. I don't take murders and rapists and violent people and those type of cases. I really keep my practice very focused on helping good people navigate a tricky area of law and protecting them against police overreach and abuse. So, it's a wonderful feeling when I do that, and it's very rewarding when we're successful. But, in all honesty, you're not always successful. There's certain counties and jurisdictions where, they're just going to go bend over backwards to try to make a simple case into something that it's not and, put first-time offenders in jail or prison or worse. And it's really just incredibly unfair. And the last, vestiges of prohibition are the very few elected officials and representatives who have their bias yet are in seats of power. And I think their timelines are limited because ultimately the people won't stand for it. I think the will of the people in Michigan is clear. We've got about 65% at least approval rating for marijuana. And now this November, we're also going to have the adult use option on the ballot for recreational adult use marijuana. So I've been heavily involved with MI Legalize. MI Legalize, who wrote the petition and gathered the required signatures to get this on the ballot this November. Progress isn't perfect, but as long as we keep moving in the right direction with cannabis law reform and fairness to patients and caregivers, I think as long as we start moving and keep moving in the right direction, we'll get where it's going to be fair for everyone.
Cool. So I'm kind of interested in, you had mentioned police abuse and overreach. Can you kind of take me there and kind of explain what happened?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, the days of police investigation are apparently no longer when it comes to marijuana crimes. Because if they actually do go investigate and knock on the door and find out who lives at the house, if they get a complaint, smell of marijuana, unfortunately, is then recognized still as probable cause to get a search warrant. Yet a simple knock and talk on the front door to knock on the door and say, hey, we've got a complaint of smell of marijuana. Are you a patient or caregiver? And, they don't even do that simple police work. I think they are a lot of times omitting that intentionally, because when they go apply for a search warrant to the magistrate or the judge, they're going to tell the judge one of two things. Either, hey, judge, we've got the smell of marijuana and neighbor complaints, we'd like a warrant. And if that's all they knew and that's all they told them, they'll get that warrant. But on the other hand, if they said, hey, Your Honor, we have smell of marijuana and complaints from neighbors, but we knocked on the door and we know the guy's a patient and a caregiver, can we still have a warrant? And in that case, there's no longer suspected criminal activity because they did a little bit of investigation work. And when they know that the person's a patient or a caregiver, then the smell of marijuana is entirely legal. So there would be no probable cause to get a warrant. Does that make sense?
So they intentionally leave it out.
Yes. Yep. I'll give you another analogy. it's like saying, hey, Your Honor, we know this building, commercial building, sells tons of Vicodin, morphine, Xanax. They're selling massive quantities of these prescription pills out of this building, and we would like a search warrant to go raid it and shut this down. And if that was all you knew and all you told the judge, of course you're going to get a search warrant for that building. But if you also know that it happens to be a Rite Aid or a CVS, and you omit the fact that it's a licensed pharmacy, it seems pretty absurd that you would get a search warrant for a Rite Aid or a CVS. And it's really no different when it comes to medical marijuana patients and their the privacy and security of their homes. Police omit these details. They don't do the investigation intentionally so that they can say, oh, well, I didn't know there was a patient or caregiver there. My bad. But at that point, it's too late. They've already been arrested. They're, potentially thousands of dollars of personal property either seized or destroyed. And then they have to pay for an attorney and go to court and go through the embarrassment of being arrested and the stress of having to go through a court process, which, again, based on one jurisdiction to another, could either be very fair or very abusive policies.
And so what's their recourse in terms of that if they had their charges dropped? Is there any?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can get your property and money and things returned if you win, but there really is no right to sue the police under Civil Rights Act because the Civil Rights 1983 Act, which protects people against police abuse, is a federal issue. And federally, marijuana is still a Schedule I substance in the United States. So the fact that you're suing over marijuana really kind of kills any kind of safety or recourse in its tracks, which is one of the hugest problems and lack of fairness in this law. I mean, just because you're a medical patient or caregiver, you then all of a sudden have no civil rights or recourse against police when they destroy your house or raid and take and destroy all of your things. I mean, if there were anything else, you bet your bottom dollar that people would be suing the police for destroying their things and being compensated fairly for it, because anything else other than marijuana, they're able to do that.
And do you foresee a change in that, like once maybe rec legalization happens? Maybe that'll stop?
It's always progress, little steps at a time. And, a lot of people get frustrated and want to jump right to the end, free weed and no crimes and amnesty for those who are already in convicted or imprisoned and clearing records and all of those things. And that's obviously that's everyone's goal who participates in this industry. But you have to understand that that's not how it's going to work. We have to understand that it is a process and progress takes time and it's not always perfect. But as long as we keep stepping in the right direction, we're good. Now, there's certain representatives in the state of Michigan which have initiated legislation to curb the civil forfeiture of assets without a conviction, which is incredibly important because if you're just accused of a crime related to marijuana, they can try to seize your car, your money, your house, and all sorts of things without even having a conviction right now. And this is a really important thing because many people do get exonerated throughout their defenses in these trials and motion hearings, and then they're left, in some cases with nothing. I mean, their lives have been thrown upside down. Everything's been taken, and maybe they'll get it back, but in what condition, who knows? If they're even able to get it back, because the civil cases are different from the criminal cases. And in a criminal case, you got to be convicted beyond a reasonable doubt. But in a civil forfeiture case, it's a civil case, so 51% wins. And it's really a way that the police and government have been cheating people out of their property for way too long. And civil forfeiture is a real abomination in our law here.
Wow. And so in terms of the forfeitures, what do they do with the property? The state sells them then, or how does that work? Or
yep, that's exactly what they do. When the police take it, they then go sell it at auction, and then they keep the money and buy tanks and rocket launchers and whatever other ridiculous things that cops think toys that they want to play with. It would be far better used on staffing and other programs, but first and foremost, you got to have a conviction. I mean, it's unbelievable and completely un-American to be able to take someone's life, liberty, or property without some sort of conviction.
Wow. And do you see foresee that law changing, or is there a lot of other different legal steps that have to take place?
Well, I think this year is going to see a lot of positive change for medical marijuana and marijuana in general in Michigan. I think that the proposed bills, I believe it's Representative Lucido, put forth a bill to end civil forfeiture without a conviction. Obviously, that's being fought heavily by the police union because they want to continue to be able to pad their pockets with seized and stolen goods, essentially, from law-abiding citizens. But I think that we will see some reform in civil forfeiture law this year. And then, of course, being on the November ballot for adult use marijuana this November, I mean, boy, I can't wait for this to pass. I had always predicted and said if it gets on the ballot, it's going to pass. And then, Michigan will have some of the best cannabis laws in the country.
Awesome. And so I don't know if I asked you this, but so what brought you to practicing cannabis in your legal practice? Like, was it an experience you had? You had mentioned you had met some caregivers and patients that kind of impacted you. Was that kind of the influence as to why you chose cannabis to practice?
Yeah, actually, I've had some family members and friends and some close friends that have had cancer and other serious debilitating conditions. And medical marijuana works. And even when they were self-medicating illegally, the relief was obvious. And when you do your homework and your due diligence, it's pretty impressive with the modern studies that are coming out showing the irrefutable proof that this is in fact medicine. And it helps for such a wide variety of conditions, even though the law here currently limits it to severe debilitating conditions. It's one of the oldest medicines on the planet. It's something that I've personally believed in for a very long time, but once I've had some family members that, medicated themselves with the Rick Simpson oil products, some of the gel capsules and things like that, and some of the topical skin creams and things like that. It's amazing the impact and the turnaround that's had. I mean, I've seen people's cancer disappear. And when you have had a personal experience with people and seen that firsthand, there's no going back. Nobody's ever going to tell me that this is not medicine. And I don't care what the judge, prosecutor, or police say. I know the truth, and that's what I'm out there battling for.
Awesome. That's totally, couldn't be said in a better way. And so I guess at this point, we're going to take a break quickly here. But when we come back, I'm kind of curious as to how you buy marijuana, like for medical purposes in Michigan. Do you have dispensaries? Do you have storefronts? Do you have to grow it for yourself? What's that process? What does it look like?
Well, currently, the Medical Marijuana Act allows for a caregiver to grow and provide medicine to 5 patients. So if I was a caregiver, I could have 5 patients all underneath me that I would then grow their 12 plants each for them and process that medication and give it to them as needed. I'm allowed to be reimbursed for my costs and even to sell it, but the caregiver to 5 patients model is very restrictive, and it wasn't really intended to be run as a business. Now, that's because the law was not written correctly when they first passed it. But obviously, an inherent part of any industry in providing people with supply and demand is you got to have stores. You got to have, places, factories that make it, and you got to have stores that sell it. And so what the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act has done this year is allow people to apply for state licenses for a provisioning center, for a processor that would make the extract for the oils and edibles, and then or cultivation licenses. And these are on commercial scale licenses, but now that these things are going forward, there's been dispensaries or provisioning centers all over the state in Michigan, but again, in some areas they're tolerated, and in other areas they're persecuted to the maximum extent of the law. So it's been very treacherous for people to participate in that type of an industry. Now we have the Facilities Licensing Act, which was passed last year, and then this year people have started to submit applications to the state of Michigan to get a state license, similar to a brewery, distillery, or anything like that. So now you're able to seek and obtain a state license to have a storefront and be able to sell it to any patient that walks through the door. So we're moving forward with progress with this. And, a lot of people have mixed opinions on the commercialization of the industry, but it's inevitable. I think it's something that needs to be embraced and needs to be, adjusted and tweaked as we go to make sure that the patients are the ones that are benefiting from this. And, I think one of the biggest things is for caregivers who have been bearing all of the risk of growing that many plants or possessing, that much marijuana with the intent of delivering it to their patients. That's been a big risk area for caregivers to take. And, if you do get raided or arrested, it's pretty expensive, stressful, time-consuming. It could take years potentially for these cases to get resolved. And now that we have the Facilities Licensing Act, we can have state licensed businesses that can now engage in this, the realistic operation of the industry without fear of going to jail or having their entire lives destroyed for doing what they thought was legal conduct.
Neat. Okay. And so you had said that it's not really designed to be a business. And so are people profiting off of? Because I know in Canada we kind of had the same model, but we could only have 3 patients that a person could grow for, but there was a lot of different abuses within that system. Do you kind of see that or not so much?
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar. And, again, the Medical Marijuana Act and the Facilities Licensing Act are 2 different laws entirely. The Medical Marijuana Act was intended for caregivers to provide it for patients and kind of on a personal level, face-to-face. It wasn't really, the industry doesn't really work that way when you consider the costs and the skill level needed for a caregiver to produce medical-grade cannabis. So the Facilities Licensing Act, I think, is solving a lot of those issues by providing, patients with a storefront that now has tested, regulated medication that they can, know that it's good quality, potency, and all of those things. I think are beneficial to the patient to know what they're getting. In the caregiver program, a lot of people are growing in their basements or pole barns or whatnot, and there's no safety compliance or testing requirements. So, you never know what you're really getting. You might know it's good marijuana or not, but ultimately you're not testing to see what exactly is in it. And I think that the regulated environment provides a good solution to make sure that patients are able to get high quality medicine and know exactly what they're getting.
Awesome. Okay. Well, so it's break time. And tonight our commercial bumpers feature the music of Neil Young and his song Roll Another Number. So when I return, we'll come back to our guest with Bruce. So we will see you in a bit.
Hey, this is Cheech.
And this is Chong.
And you're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
What is it?
Lifestyle Radio. Say it one more time.
420 radio?
Ooh.
Please hang up and try again.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
It's too dark to put the keys in my ignition, and the morning sun is yet to climb my hood ornament. But before too long I might see those flashing red lights.
Canada, the time to act is now. These days, your customers are seeking variety. Increase your earning potential by expanding your inventory with CC Nexus, Canada's largest cannabis seed wholesaler. CC Nexus stocks over 60 reputable breeders, including Canuck seeds, with a wealth of autoflower, regular, feminized, and CBD strains. All first-time customers will receive a free pack of Canuck seeds, plus a mug, t-shirt, and additional promotional materials. Add strains and increase your profit with CC Nexus, your Canadian-owned and operated wholesaler of cannabis seeds. Discreet, worldwide stealth shipping from Canada, supporting you locally. Call today, 1-844-843-7995, 1-844-843-7995, or visit us at ccnexus.global.
A big thank you to our listeners. Because of you, you're listening to the award-winning Pace Radio Show here on Lifestyle Radio.
The following is a public service announcement from the Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners Society. The Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners Society is a non-profit organization dedicated to ensuring improved access to therapeutic cannabis and cannabis byproducts in Canada. With a federal government that has committed to legalizing cannabis, We feel it is our duty to ensure that the medicinal use of cannabis doesn't get lost in the process and that there are clear distinctions made between the medicinal and recreational use of cannabis. It is our mission to ensure that government regulation doesn't get in the way of a sick, disabled, or terminally ill person's right to use or produce this amazing natural health product. If you would like to get involved, you can contact us on the internet, www.canadiantherapeuticcannabispartners.com, on Facebook, CTCP Society, or search Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners.
CTCP now operates a medicinal cannabis signing clinic. If you want to grow your own medicinal cannabis and are located anywhere in Canada, then I'd like to suggest that you give them a call. They can be reached at 1-613-967-9888. That's 1-613-967-9888, and grow on with CTCP.
Man, have you been to Canadays yet? Canadays, Campbellford's premier cannabis culture shop at 19 Bridge Street West. They've got bongs, oil rigs, grinders, and papers. Everything you need for consumption. They've got seeds, soil, nutrients, and dome trays too. Everything you need for cultivation. Get top quality seeds from top suppliers like Canuck and wholesaler Nexus. Canadays. They've got all kinds of awesome cannabis novelties, clothing, and apparel. I know, right? It's a lot more than just a bong shop. Interested in gaining legal access? Canadays can help. They're a PACE information center. You know, people advocating cannabis education. Come by the shop and check it out. 19 Bridge Street West, Campbellford. Canadays. Have your say without saying a word. Canadays.ca.
Hello? Oh, hi, sorry. Hello, and welcome back. You're listening to the Pace Radio Show. We're live at lifestyleradio.net. Tonight, I'm joined by my guest, lawyer Bruce Leach from Michigan. We've been enjoying our conversation about cannabis, well, medical cannabis in Michigan. And so we're going to further our talk about cannabis business, because I noticed, Bruce, that you offer your clients business planning. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this is an emerging area of industry and business that's really new territory for a lot of people. So as confusing as the Medical Marijuana Act was, it's important that people get the right advice and business advice to be successful with, number one, obtaining a state license, but then running it compliant. And they've set a lot of regulations in place to do that. And, you know, now it's new territory, so it's a very exciting time and opportunity for people to get into the business and help patients and caregivers and probably turn a little bit of a profit as well. So the Facilities Licensing Act.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The Facilities Licensing Act here in Michigan provides for 5 different licenses that people can seek and obtain. The big three are cultivation, which you can get a Class A, B, or C license, and cultivation license ABC is 500, 1,000, or 1,500 plants total, which is pretty significant. Wow. And then you have the ability to get a processor license, which is then taking the leaf for the rest of the plant products, doing the extracting for the essential oils, and then combining that into various forms of edible products. And once you have gone through either the cultivation or then the processing portion, it gets sold out of provisioning centers. And, dispensary provisioning center is an interchangeable term, but that's another license that you can seek. Now, there are 2 additional licenses that are kind of supplemental to that and yet important still at the same time, which are the safety compliance facility, which is basically a testing lab where they will test the marijuana for any kind of contaminants as well as potency and purity. You also then have a secure transporter license, which I've got mixed opinions on, honestly. The secure transport license is designed so that you have a Brinks truck or FedEx type trucks that are responsible for transporting product between and among the various licensed businesses. Unfortunately, I think that the secure transport license was born of some corruption and heavy lobbying by certain individuals in Michigan to make sure that there was a middleman that was going to be able to make some money when things changed hands, as well as, ultimately this is going to increase the cost of medication for patients to get ultimately at the dispensaries or provisioning centers. So while I entirely agree with the safety compliance facility and lab testing and those requirements, the secure transport, I think, is not necessary. I think it's going to significantly increase the cost of the end user of the medication. And, we'll see how it plays out. Hopefully it'll be a competitive market like FedEx and UPS where they're competing for business rather than something that the state steps in, sets mandatory fees for, which would then kind of give it a middleman monopoly.
Okay, and so when you have these licenses, are you still subject to like police raids and stuff? Is there no?
No, not really. I mean, it kind of takes the fear and anticipation and apprehension away from, am I going to get arrested for doing what I'm doing? I think that kind of goes away. And where it leaves you is, with a state license, you're pretty much free to operate the way that we all know that this business should be operating. You're not really going to have the issues of, am I going to get raided or is my property going to get seized or taken? It does provide for the protections for doing that on the state level. Now, federally, it's still illegal, so there's still some conflict there. But, I think that as long as you're compliant with state law, you've got some insulation at least and can sleep a little better at night. Not having to worry about the federal government coming in and banging down your door. I think if there's going to be federal action taken against states that have these license programs, it's probably going to start out west where there's actually money. The government really doesn't come and arrest people who are, who don't have anything for them to take. And especially when it comes to cannabis, they're going after the money. And so, the big operators that have made a lot of money are in California, Colorado, the western states in the United States have all the money. So I would probably anticipate California being the proving ground, just as they paved the way originally for medical marijuana in the United States. I think if there's some sort of federal crackdown or anything like that, it would start there. But I really don't anticipate that happening. Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, has made some comments regarding marijuana that are pretty ignorant, and they've completely backfired on him. I think it's really sparked a discussion topic, and it's pushing people to choose sides. And the vast majority of the American public support this. Every generation that comes along, I think it gets more and more support. So ultimately, I think the train's on the tracks, and it's not going to be stopped.
Nice. And so in terms of Trump's administration, you don't think that he'll crack down on medical marijuana or marijuana in general, during his time in, or it's hard to say. Yeah.
Well, I mean, hey, I don't think anybody's a fan of politics in the United States recently, but unfortunately, they've made some concerning statements, but I don't necessarily see it happening unless you're a pretty egregious violator. And now I will say there are different levels of protection for medical marijuana versus recreational marijuana. And in states like California, where they have now recreational, that potentially would be a target way before any medical states that are purely medical. I think there's a recognized difference even at the federal level that, hey, this is a medical type facility, or this is just a place selling marijuana so people can get high. I don't have a problem with either one, but there legally is a significant distinction in state and federal law.
So in Michigan, do you have people like setting up illegal like dispensaries, or is that not something that kind of happens? Like most people go through the channels of, or not really?
I mean, illegal dispensaries, I mean, technically up to this point, they've all been in the gray area. Sure, there are illegal operators out there that are, running a storefront until the wheels fall off because they're going to make more money doing this than they will doing anything else. And, life opportunities and things like that. Unfortunately, when people are desperate or need money, they're going to do things that they normally maybe wouldn't do. But going forward from there, I think that this Facilities Licensing Act now with issuing state licenses for these businesses will clean a lot of that up. There won't be able to be a lot of illegal operators once there are legal regulated operators. I think that's going to have a big impact going forward. The other side of it is when you have the regulated environment and the significant costs and investment associated with that, there's going to be people who can't necessarily meet those financial requirements for whatever reason, and they'll resort to the black market. That's obviously with everything, even legal pharmaceutical drugs or alcohol. People are still moonshining. People are still selling pills on the street. So, it's an inherent part of life that there's going to be a subculture or black market associated with just about everything. I mean, even for handbags and purses, they got knockoff stores and watches and everything else. So that's just reality. I think that the steps that Michigan is taking hopefully will curb the black market and drive it into regulated business so that it's done lawfully, so that those tax revenues can be used to improve schools and our infrastructure in Michigan. I mean, I don't know. I'm just about a lifelong resident here in Michigan, other than when I went to college in New York and then lived in Miami for a few years. But I've never seen our roads and infrastructure in such poor condition. There are potholes the size of people. And, this tax revenues and jobs and all the benefits that would come from the regulated marijuana industry can solve those problems clearly. And, I mean, it's working for a lot of other states out west. Colorado's a great example. And there's been, we're now getting the real data and the real studies and the real statistics from those states where they've done this. And overall, it's been shown to be a net positive gain to those communities. I think Michigan desperately needs that.
Wow. And so in terms of health care, how does that work in Michigan? Like, do people have to pay for themselves? Like, is that the myth that the states have? Like, take us there. Like, what does your health care look like in terms of medical cannabis?
Well, the answer is zero for medical cannabis, unfortunately. You guys are quite a bit more compassionate and advanced than we are down here when it comes to insurance companies covering the cost of medications and things like that. Right now in Michigan, there is no support, no benefit, and quite frequently patients and caregivers are turned away from traditional doctors and their treatments if they're participating in the medical program, which to me is just discrimination. I think it's very wrong. And even the same as with employment. Employers are drug testing and firing people for having medical marijuana in their system, even though they've never smoked or been high at work. There's still a lot of discrimination and abuse that's going on, and this is something that I will be dedicating, to fight against and try to help, push things in the right direction.
And so if you couldn't afford to have a doctor sign and advocate for you, you would just fall prey to the criminal justice system then as a patient?
Yeah. Unfortunately, that happens a lot. They do have reduced, if you're indigent or have other things, I mean, they do have programs for reduced fees, but the state of Michigan only charges $60 for the marijuana card that's good for 2 years. The doctor's office can usually charge anywhere from $70 to $100 for the certification work. So it's not a lot when you consider the cost of getting arrested and having to hire a lawyer and go through the entire legal system. For sure. And for people who smoke or use marijuana, either medically or recreationally, it's always advisable to have that card because it's a level of protection that can potentially save you thousands for what could be under $200. And it's really unfortunate. I mean, there are also a lot of really compassionate caregivers and people in Michigan who give this medication free to people who need it. And I'll say on the positive side, I deal with a lot of people who are really in this for the right reasons. They really, truly care about patients. If somebody absolutely needs it, they get it, no questions asked. There's no money needed to do that. So, that's what this industry, the cannabis industry, is all about, helping people and doing the right thing no matter what, regardless of the money. And you make the money off the people who want to get high, give the patients what they need, and help everybody live a happier and healthier life.
Oh, I agree. And so in terms of these cards, I'm kind of curious. So they're provided by the state government, is that correct? Under their licensing program?
Yep. So
okay.
If you go establish the bona fide doctor-patient relationship, the doctor will fill out the certification paperwork, and you mail that into the state with a $60 check, and then usually takes about a month, and you'll receive your card back in the mail, and it's good for 2 years. And then once you have that card, the entire registry and everybody's identity and information in that registry is confidential, which is great because law enforcement can't then just look up random people's names and say, oh, he's a patient or he's a caregiver, let's go knock on his door or house or whatever. So that information is kept confidential. And if you do have a police interaction and you have marijuana, then you would provide your identification, provide your patient or caregiver card, and then they can call the state and verify that the card is in fact valid and current. But that's the extent of the information that they can get. They can't just look somebody up and it pops up in their system that this person is a patient or caregiver. Now, if you've had previous police interaction and had to show your card, they may make a note in their system that you are a patient or caregiver. But speaking, that information is confidential and protected, and it should be, just like anyone other medical records.
Oh, cool. No, I quite appreciate that. Awesome. Okay, so it's time for another break. So tonight, our music feature is Neil Young and his song, Roll Another Number. So we're going to go to break, and then we will continue our conversation with Bruce.
Please hang up and try again.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
Woodstock for a while. Though I long to hear that lonesome hippie smile, I'm a million miles away from that helicopter day. Oh, I don't believe I'll be going back that way.
Man, have you been to Canadays yet? Canadays, Campbellford's premier cannabis culture shop at 19 Bridge Street West. They've got bongs, oil rigs, grinders, and papers. Everything you need for consumption. They've got seeds, soil, nutrients, and dome trays too. Everything you need for cultivation. Get top quality seeds from top suppliers like Canuck and wholesaler Nexus. Canadays. They've got all kinds of awesome cannabis novelties, clothing, and apparel. I know, right? It's a lot more than just a bong shop. Interested in gaining legal access? Canadays can help. They're a PACE information center. You know, people advocating cannabis education. Come by the shop and check it out. 19 Bridge Street West, Campbellford. Canadays. Have your say without saying a word. Canadays.ca.
Hi, this is Al Graham of the Pace Radio Show. Are you keeping pace, as in keeping people advocating cannabis education? If you're not, and you're a cannabis consumer, then why not? Others are working hard every day to help educate people about cannabis so you can enjoy your daily 420. Get involved and speak out. Be loud and proud so that you can keep pace. Tune into the Pace Radio Show every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to hear about people advocating cannabis education here on lifestyleradio.ca.
This is Northern Ontario, Kim Cooper. Catch me every Monday at 4:20 on The Reefer Reporters, aired on lifestyleradio.net. Available for replay or download on Lifestyle Radio or Spreaker.
Canada, the time to act is now. These days, your customers are seeking variety. Increase your earning potential by expanding your inventory with CC Nexus, Canada's largest cannabis seed wholesaler. CC Nexus stocks over 60 reputable breeders, including Canuck seeds, with a wealth of autoflower, regular, feminized, and CBD strains. All first-time customers will receive a free pack of Canuck seeds, plus a mug, t-shirt, and additional promotional materials. Add strains and increase your profit with CC Nexus, your Canadian-owned and operated wholesaler of cannabis seeds. Discreet, worldwide stealth shipping from Canada, supporting you locally. Call today, 1-844-843-7995, 1-844-843-7995, or visit us at ccnexus.global.
Hello and welcome back. Thanks for tuning in to the Pace Radio Show. Tonight, our guest, lawyer Bruce Leach from Michigan. Welcome back. And I guess where I want to go tonight, after a break here, let me hear about your 5-year plan in terms of legalization and medical marijuana in Michigan.
Well, thanks, and welcome back, everybody. It's a very exciting time in Michigan. We've had the medical law in the books for several years. There are a number of really excellent and qualified attorneys across Michigan that has been fighting a good fight and battling for patient and caregiver rights at every turn, trying to set some good precedent and change the minds of the powers that be and judges, prosecutors, and even law enforcement to the reality that cannabis is in fact medicine. And while it's been sometimes slow and painful progress, we're moving in the right direction. So going forward, I'll continue to dedicate my practice to protecting patients and caregiver rights, to making sure that people are not being abused by the police and their overreach and bias against marijuana, and helping to broaden people's horizons and educate them. And that's ultimately what we do when we go battle these cases in court. We're educating the judge, we're educating the prosecutor, we're educating the juries to understand what this really is, why people are doing it, and how it truly is a miracle plant. And it's something that I feel so very strongly about. I've had family members and close friends that have had some serious medical conditions, and the results from them using cannabis are miraculous cures in some cases, not just fixes or making you feel better, cures. So, when you've had that kind of experience and you see firsthand how well this really truly does work, it just strengthens my convictions and my dedication to seeking real justice and helping people avoid the pitfalls associated with a difficult and sometimes confusing law. But in the next few years, it's an exciting time. We've got the Facilities Licensing Act now, which is going to authorize these businesses to conduct commercial business in the state of Michigan, which is an inevitable and necessary reality to properly functioning cannabis industry. And it's exciting times. I mean, this year I've already submitted several client applications to the state of Michigan, and we're anxiously awaiting their responses for approval. There's a lot of benefits that are coming out of this, from rehabilitating rundown areas in various municipalities and warehouses and abandoned buildings that are now going to be multi-million-dollar ventures, hiring dozens, if not more jobs. So the socioeconomic benefits, the lack of abusing people and throwing them in the legal system for a harmless plant. I mean, all are positives, and I think we're continuing down the right direction. But this November is going to be a lot shaken out. It's a very important election year for so many reasons. One of the most important things that people kind of overlook, I mean, everybody wants to get focused on the presidential elections and things like that, but nothing is more important than your local elections. Who are your city representatives? Who are your prosecutors, judges, chief of police? Who are those local people? Because those are the ones that you're going to have run-ins with and have to deal with when the time comes. And local elections really, truly mean it all. I mean, Michigan's cannabis law is based on a home rule law. So if a municipality or a city or a township decides we want these businesses in our town, they can pass an ordinance and authorize them and license these businesses, and then they're eligible to go get a state license. And in other towns, if they don't want it and they don't want these businesses in town, they can say, we're not going to allow these businesses in town. Go drive to the next town over and get your stuff. And that's just fine as well. I mean, they're going to, I think, really regret this in a couple of years when they're not getting the tax revenue that the cities who opt in will be. But again, tax revenues, job creation, all positive things, property value rehabilitation. I mean, I think the results have been pretty clear out of Colorado, and it's very exciting to, be a part of this industry, helping good people stay out of trouble, and, hopefully helping a lot of these people establish now very successful businesses.
Awesome. And so over there in the United States, in terms of cannabis and the sale of it, is your government involved in any capacity, or do they just license?
The state government is a licensing board that's supposed to be a neutral board that licenses, but we've got elections coming up for our state attorney general, which is a very important race. We've got the governor's race that's coming up. There's a lot of local state representatives there seeking seats, and all of those individuals are very, very important. I mean, the attorney general we've had in Michigan has not been favorable to cannabis and has kind of made it his mission to try to stamp it out, along with some of the more biased sheriffs in the state of Michigan. But I think his time is up, and our next candidate, whoever it may be, I think just about every candidate for attorney general now realizes that the public vote is very clear in support of medical marijuana. So I think just about all of them have jumped on board with, yes, we're okay with medical marijuana now going forward, because 65% of the people are voting and in favor of it. So that's a pretty large and powerful movement, and it's great to see, the cannabis movement having that kind of power behind the votes, because really, when it comes down to it, we're caring and compassionate people. We love one another. We're trying to help people the best that we can, and that's why I do what I do. I do it because I want to help people and do the best that I can to make sure that they're treated fairly and get some real justice. So if anybody out there is listening from Michigan, you can feel free to get in touch with me at any time. I'm available on Facebook at Bruce Leach. My cell phone number for my office is 810-275-8899. And my email is bruceleach.law@gmail.com. If you have any questions about the law, or if you know anybody that needs help, I'm here to help.
That's awesome. And so I guess when you talk about these actions and changing the law, I'm just kind of curious, because I know what it costs in Canada. What does it cost to fuel like a motion in, if that's what it's called, in the United States to actually have impact or create better case law when it comes to medical cannabis?
Well, it's a tricky question, and a lot of it depends on the facts of the case and how significant or how minor the alleged violations are. There's a number of cannabis attorneys in the state of Michigan who are excellent at what they do, and you're generally going to pay a higher price to have the best representation. But a lot of us are also very, very compassionate, and if it's truly for veterans or cancer patients and things like that, I mean, I give away tens of thousands of dollars in free legal services to people who truly deserve it every year, and nice. It's my honor. It's my honor to do that, honestly. I mean, that's what this is all about, is helping people. So, I try to pay it forward as much as I can. Try to pay it forward as much as I can and help people. And, when it comes time, there really isn't a price that you can put on winning a case and setting good case law and impacting the minds of the prosecutor and the judge. A few $1,000s for a defense of a case really is priceless when you win that, and then help everyone further down the line if they have an issue that comes up in that same court or jurisdiction. So generally speaking, it can range from $5,000 to $50,000. It really just depends on the type of case that it is, the amounts and controversy and all of those type of specific details. It's really difficult to give one blanket fee or amount. Mm-hmm. But again, each case is looked at individually for its merits and its defenses, And we're always striving to win those cases, have a positive impact, and persuade judges and prosecutors to deal with them more fairly. And I've had a pretty good win streak going on lately. So against some local narcotics teams, I think hopefully it's going to change their mind and get them to back off quite a bit, because they're bringing these cases thinking they got them slam dunked, and they're leaving court with their tail between their legs when I win.
Nice. Awesome. And so I guess, what's the greatest satisfaction for you in terms of like your legal process and practice? Is it the win? Is it the case law? Like what fuels your desire, I guess?
Well, I mean, again, I feel like cannabis patients and caregivers are good people. They're law-abiding citizens. Mm-hmm. They're not bad people. They're not victimizing anybody. I mean, these are truly victimless crimes that really don't make any sense that it's even a crime. So for me, the most rewarding thing is helping people and knowing and seeing the families when they're set free, returning their property and monies and things like that. It's incredibly rewarding. And the satisfaction of winning a case and setting a good precedent is far better than any financial motivation. But, I've had some really amazing, touching stories with people with epilepsy and cancer. And, I tell you what, some of my favorite cases in my life have been when I won those cases for those people who really deserved it.
Nice. And so how did they, I guess, receive that win, or understand that win, I guess,
tears of joy, celebration, elation, and relief. Relief is one of the biggest things, because, not knowing what's going to happen in your future, or am I going to be arrested? Am I going to be jailed? What's going to happen to my family and my kids? I mean, those are all completely unfair things for a patient or caregiver to have to worry about. So, when you get these cases over with and they're resolved favorably, it's fantastic on every level.
Okay. And so on the other side, when things don't go so well, what does that look like?
Well, I'll reiterate what everybody knows. When it comes time, when the police show up and they're there to investigate you for a potential crime, do not talk to the police. They're not there to help you. They're there. I mean, they say the Miranda warning is, anything you say can be used against you in the court of law. It really should say everything you say will be used against you. And especially in the situation where if you go to court for a cannabis charge and you have a card, it's an affirmative defense situation. So it's not like a traditional criminal case where the government has the full burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that you're guilty. You have the burden of proving that you meet the elements required to benefit from that affirmative defense. So it's a little bit tricky, and no pun intended, preventative medicine is the best medicine. So hire a lawyer, ask the question. There's no such thing as silly questions. Hire an attorney. If you have any questions, ask. I mean, many of us will just answer and talk to you on the phone and give you the answers right away. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to be proactive and protect yourself in the event that this does happen, because those who are educated and prepared will fare far better if and when the police do stop by than those who are, well, boy, I thought I was doing it right. And, it's a pretty rude awakening sometimes to find out that, leaving your door unlocked or having someone assist you with trimming the plants is a violation that could then result in being charged with felonies.
So you'd encourage folks to make a retainer to you. Do you do that in the States, right? Like people can. Yeah,
absolutely. To me, not even to me, but talk to a competent attorney who really knows what they're doing. Ask them, what's your experience level with dealing with these? How many cases have you tried? How many motions have you run? How many have you won? What were those circumstances? I mean, do your due diligence. It's hard to read all the case law and everything, but that's what you hire the experts for. But when out of my clients that have come to me ahead of time and retained my services and gotten the good advice and the protective measures and documentation that they need to have those defenses, I'm proud to say that not one of them has been convicted of a felony.
Ooh, nice. That's brilliant.
Preparation and education is everything. Knowing is half the battle.
For sure. And then, so I guess after the fact is kind of like when it gets messy, right? Like, so
Yeah,
it's not always
you
so
can,
good.
You can prevent the mess from happening. That's the key here. Prevent it from getting that bad. A lot of things you can do to be proactive and gathering the right information, making sure that you're again, establishing all of those criteria, the bona fide doctor-patient relationship, all of the elements of these affirmative defense things. You can document all this stuff thoroughly, and if you keep proper records and know what you're talking about and why you're doing what you're doing, I mean, again, preventative medicine is the best medicine. You can really protect yourself against full-on disasters.
Awesome. And so in terms of like
my job a lot more, it makes my job a lot more fun because then I have the ammunition to go in there and beat the police at their own game.
Nice. Okay. And then, so in terms of police interaction as well, you had said that you're not supposed to speak with the police. Is there anything else you would advise folks, like when dealing with them in terms of like searches? Like, how does that work there? Like,
well,
searches and property.
They always will ask you, do you consent to the search? And, the appropriate answer would be, with all due respect, officer, I've been advised of my rights by my attorney. I will answer all of your questions when my attorney is present, and I'm not going to consent to any searches. If you just keep it professional, keep it polite, and conduct yourself accordingly, it goes a lot better. I mean, generally my clients, I tell them if you even see the police, you immediately speed dial me and have me on speakerphone with the phone in your hand, because when they come up and knock on the door and want to play games with you, if they know that you've been advised by an attorney and, oh, here he is on the phone, they're a lot less likely to play cowboy.
Brilliant. Okay. And then, so I guess if they do search, though, like what's the recourse then? If you decline the search, but they refuse to, I guess, answer, answer to that. So what happens next? Like, is that like a rights violation there, or?
We'll walk through a typical situation real quick. So let's say you're a caregiver and you're growing plants at your house and you've got some medicine and whatnot, and you're a patient or caregiver, and the police show up and they say, hey, listen, we know you're growing marijuana here. Let's do it the easy way or the hard way. Let us in and let us search and count your plants and search your house. And if everything's fine, we'll leave. Or if you want to do it the hard way, then we'll come back with a warrant and we'll tear it up and arrest you. And those are, you got to remember, the police don't play by the same rules. They're allowed to lie and cheat and tell you whatever they want in order to be able to gain access or get you to tell them information. So if you don't provide them with any information other than, hello, officer, here's my identification. Here are all my valid patient and caregiver cards. I'm fully compliant with the law, and I'd like my lawyer present for all future questioning. Because in the United States, we have a Sixth Amendment right to counsel. So when the police are interrogating you or asking you questions, you have a right to have an attorney present. And when you invoke that right to have your attorney present, they have to stop asking you questions until your attorney is present. Now, in a case where you don't consent, and you don't let them in, and you invoke your right to counsel, they will leave and they'll probably go try to get a search warrant. But again, it's that old CVS Rite Aid analogy. When they go to the judge and they say, Judge, we stopped by Bruce's house and we wanted to, go check his plants. He told us no, but he showed us his valid caregiver cards and patient cards. Judge, we still want to get a warrant to search his house. Well, at that point, the judge and magistrate ought to say, well, what's the criminal activity that's suspected? You smell marijuana. He's got a patient or caregiver card. What's the allegation of criminality? And that's where the police fall short. And now certain judges and prosecutors and magistrates will just rubber stamp any search warrant. But when we go to court, I can get that thrown out. I mean, there are defenses, and dismissal is basically the remedy for that. And if they violate your Fourth Amendment right to search and seizure and privacy in your home. So, I mean, there are things you can do to protect yourselves. It's not always a smooth and easy sailing ship, but, knowing your rights and being educated in how to handle yourself in those situations will generally help you prevail. Most of the people that I've represented who didn't get favorable outcomes was because they talked to the police. I'd say 80 to 90% of the people who didn't get a favorable outcome were specifically because of what they said, not even what they did.
Oh.
Because again, I mean, just like when I would teach to other lawyers and judges and seminars, I mean, if lawyers and judges can't understand this, there's no way the cops do, and there's no way that the average patient or caregiver does either. So, a lot of times the police will come in, they'll ask, hey, what's going on here? And, the patient thinks, hey, I'm doing everything right. And I'm going to explain to them, this is what I'm doing here, this is what I'm doing there, and I'm fully compliant. But the cop will latch on to one word and say, oh, that was the wrong word. Therefore, you just admitted a technical violation. Now we're going to, charge you with a crime and take all your stuff. And that happens very frequently. But it's really based on, and honestly, the cops don't know what your conduct is. They're coming in. All they know is that there's marijuana here. And that's it. So beyond that, the only way they get information is people volunteer it, or they actually do some investigation and police work and try to come up with some evidence. But generally speaking, in state cases, they're only showing up because they know marijuana is physically present. So if it's present, that's fine. But they show up, you provide ID and your patient caregiver cards, and that's the end. That should be the end of the story. It just becomes difficult when you start explaining or trying to reason or get them to understand and agree with you. They're not there to understand. They're not there to agree. They're not there to reason with. They're there to arrest you because they're there to investigate a crime, and they want to do their job, and they've been trained that their job is successful when someone's arrested. And, that's, I think, a big difference culturally between Canadian police and U.S. police. But, every time I've been to Canada, people are so nice and compassionate and understanding and wonderful. Here, it's just not that way. And, I mean, they're here for a reason. They're here to arrest you. So, again, everything you say will be used against you. And if you can keep your mouth shut and be polite, professional, provide ID, provide them with your cards that show you're entitled to have what you have. But from then on, ask for your lawyer to be present, and that generally will shut them down from major abuse.
Nice. And so in terms of racism and cannabis, do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, cannabis patients and caregivers are kind of treated like their own race by police, not necessarily white, black, or anything else. Just being a patient or caregiver, sometimes you're looked down upon and discriminated against. And, that's something that we're constantly fighting and trying to get people to understand. I mean, no, we're not just stoners. I mean, these are medical patients with serious conditions who need this medicine. They can't take Vicodins, or they don't want to die from opioids. I mean, it's pretty absurd that, the police, it's okay for them to drink or take all kinds of pills and cause unbelievable harm to their bodies. But cannabis, which is healthy and safe alternative to so many medications, is frowned upon. And, again, there's a lot of factors behind the scenes that are trying to keep it that way. But I think those days are limited. I think we're on the path to, some cannabis progress and reform.
Awesome. And so I guess in the next little while, what's your main focus? What are you working on?
Right now, I'm helping a number of clients with their state applications for the cultivation, processing, and provisioning centers, and hopefully we'll be working with the state throughout the course of this year to help them get approved for their licenses, and then set up shop and maintain legally compliant businesses going forward. I think again, the job creation, the economic benefit, and the huge benefit of the lives saved by not being thrown in the legal system and put on probation and loss of jobs. And I mean, there's so many other factors that stem from it. It's not just the one thing. So again, we're trying to make progress on all these fronts and continue to push for, fairness and justice in cannabis law.
Awesome. And so to you, how do you define justice? What is justice?
Well, in a perfect world, that patients and caregivers are left alone. I mean, cannabis should not be illegal. Cannabis should not be illegal. It's an incredibly helpful and wonderful beneficial medicinal plant that can be used for thousands of different reasons. I think the prohibition has clearly failed, and the costs are astronomical. It's had an incredible toll on people, on the society, on financially and economically and socially as well. There's so many benefits to ending this failed war on cannabis that it's just the sky's the limit going forward. I mean, I try to look at the positive, and stay focused on how good this is going to be when we actually accomplish our goals and the cannabis community comes together and works towards, ending, police arrests and abuse of patients and caregivers when they're left alone and when they're respected as, a patient that has a serious condition and they're respected for their choice of medicine. And these businesses are recognized as law-abiding, businesses that are providing huge economic benefit and job creation. I think that's ultimately the goal, recognizing that, this is a million times better than the alcohol or tobacco industry or even big pharmaceuticals. Ultimately, that's the goal.
And so the rec market, is that kind of like separate to you, or do you kind of play in both, or not really?
Well, as of right now, we only have a medical market here in Michigan, but if it passes and when it passes in November, then the law will change to allow for adult use cannabis, and it's going to be a whole different market. I mean, I support both markets, and to me, it doesn't really matter much whether you like it for fun or you like it for medicine. Currently, the law protects medicine, and that's something that I've been, fighting every day for and incredibly dedicated to. But the commercial side of this with adult use is just as beneficial. I mean, the tax dollars are a lot bigger, the number of jobs is a lot bigger, and it's only going up from here. I mean, Michigan for many years had the big three automakers and had lots of auto factories and everything else, but they're all gone. And especially in the city of Flint, where our city was based off of manufacturing jobs for the auto industry, they're pretty much all gone. So now, I share the vision with some of our local leaders on like the Flint City Council that they want to bring back a different kind of manufacturing jobs now, which is cannabis manufacturing. So I think it's a great replacement. I think that the revenues and the tax revenues especially could equal or even hopefully pass what the auto industry did for these cities in the past.
Neat. And so your medical system will maintain itself, though? Like, it won't become one? They won't merge, or will they?
Yeah, no, the medical system and program will stay intact. My anticipation, if they do pass the recreational use, was that it'll just set up a different tax bracket, most likely, similar to what they do in Colorado versus, in-state medical sales versus out-of-state recreational sales. There's different tax brackets associated with the type of transaction and use. And I think that's most likely what will happen in Michigan, and hopefully they'll kind of follow the path that's already been laid out and not try to reinvent the wheel here.
And so do you think that one day Canadians and Americans will be able to take weed across the borders like you can alcohol and tobacco, like one day?
Boy, I sure hope so.
Yeah, isn't that neat? Wouldn't that be neat?
It would be a wonderful day, indeed. I've had some great trips to Canada and dealing with some wonderful people up there interested in this industry in New Brunswick and some other areas near Ottawa. And, I think ultimately we'll get there. There's still some major hurdles to overcome, but won't that be a special day?
Oh, for sure. I can't wait for that day. So, is there anything, you kind of have a little bit of an introduction to yourself. Is there any contact information you'd like to share with our listeners where they can contact
Absolutely.
you? Or any? Okay.
Yeah, the best way to contact me if you have any questions or anything in writing is via email, and that's bruceleach.law@gmail.com, BRUCELEACH.law@gmail.com. Feel free to send me an email if you have any questions or concerns, and I'd be happy to help you understand the law and make sure that you're being careful and properly advised on your course of conduct. If anybody has any interest in state licensing or patient caregiver questions or anything like that, again, I'm here to help. And my goal is to prevent the police from doing what they've been doing in the past and abusing patients and caregivers. So, again, the more you know, the less likely you are to have serious problems.
Awesome. And so you could help with federal cases then, too, in terms of cannabis, or is that a different ballgame? Oh, okay.
Well, it's a different ballgame. I mean, we don't have the medical defenses on the federal level, although some federal courts have allowed the discussion that it was a state medical marijuana, situation. It doesn't provide the legal defenses yet on the federal level. So, again, we're working towards its progress. I mean, we've got 27 states now that have medical or better laws on the books, and I think it's only a matter of time until the government is forced to change its stance on marijuana. I mean, it's pretty absurd that the DEA doesn't recognize it as medicine, even though 27 states do and millions of people do. Ultimately, I think it's inevitable. It's just a matter of time.
And do you think that it's like that social stigma that's going to take crushing to, kind of push that ballot forward? Or what's that? Is it ending that discrimination, you think? That's what I think, that will take kind of worldwide.
I think every generation realize, every future generation, every time we have a changing out of the guard of these old dinosaur politicians with their bias and reefer madness nonsense. I mean, every time we replace them with young people who are educated and intelligent on this subject, we're taking steps in the right direction. It's only a matter of time until the last few dinosaurs of prohibition are gone. And again, every younger generation that comes up realizes this for what it is. And I think ultimately we will prevail.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and answering my questions. I know my listeners have really appreciated some of your advice and all of your answers. So thank you very much. Is there anything you'd like to? Go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. It's a great honor. I'm really humbled and hope that what I've said and the information I provided helps people, because that's what this is all about, and the cannabis community is all about, helping people and helping each other. And, thank you guys so much for having me on the show tonight. And again, if anybody has any questions or anything else I can help with, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll do my best.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for fighting the good fight.
You bet, Alicia.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
So what are you
Have
doing?
a great night.
Nothing? Why not?
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.